The second case in 1972 was Mills versus the D.C. Board of Education. This class action lawsuit was brought on behalf of 7 children and other similarly situated students who had been identified as having behavioral problems or being mentally retarded, emotionally disturbed, and/or hyperactive. All of the students had been excluded from school or denied educational services that would have addressed the needs that arose from those disabilities. The plaintiffs argued that the failure of the school board in the District of Columbia to provide them with a public school education constituted a denial of their right to an education. The court agreed, citing Brown versus the Board of Education, likening the treatment of the plaintiffs to the segregation outlawed by the Supreme Court in Brown v. the Board of Education. The federal district court stated that the school district had clearly violated the students' right to a public education under the laws of District of Columbia. Following the decisions in these 2 cases, 36 additional right to education lawsuits were filed, challenging unfair statutes or practices that had prevented children with disabilities from receiving a public education. This trend eventually led to important federal policies such as the Education for All Handicapped Children of 1975, which finally made a free public education a reality for many children who had previously been denied. It became increasingly apparent to Congress that the time had come for the federal government to establish detailed standards pertaining to the education of handicapped children. In 1973, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act was enacted. This statute outlawed handicap-based discrimination in any program, including public education, which received direct or indirect federal financial assistance. Unfortunately, it was not sufficiently clear regarding its applicability to public education, which prompted Congress to enact in a more specific manner. In 1974, an interim statute was enacted to enable Congress to analyze the handicap situation. The end result was the enactment of the 1975 Education for All Handicapped Children Act. Also known as Public Law 94-142, the EHA was enacted by the United States Congress and required all public schools accepting federal funds to provide equal access to education and 1 free meal a day for children with physical and mental disabilities. EHA contained a provision that allows the maximum possible opportunity to enact with non-impaired students, what they call the least restrictive environment. It also required schools to evaluate disabled children and create an educational plan with parent input that would emulate as closely as possible the educational experience of non-disabled students. This provision ultimately led to the creation of the IEP.